Good evening and welcome to the second of our series of 3 QuinnSights sessions. This evening, we're going to focus on careers in the technology sector and data analytics roles. My name is Mita Dutt and I'm the Placement and Mentoring Manager here at Quinn School of Business. But first and foremost, I'm delighted to welcome our panel of tech and data analytics specialists, 2 of whom did their undergraduate degrees here at Quinn School of Business, and all of whom have spent time studying at the College of Business. I'm also delighted to introduce Quinn's own Dr. Michael McDonald, Professor and Director of the Academic Centre here, as our host for this evening. Before I hand over to Michael, I have a couple of pieces of housekeeping and reminders to cover. Please feel free to use the Q&A box throughout the webinar, and your questions will be picked up by the Q&A session at the end. I just wanted to also remind you that all students have access to excellent career support via the UCD Careers Network, and I'll post details up during the session. Leonie Phipps is our dedicated Quinn School of Business and Careers and Skills consultant. And finally, a reminder that next week's QuinnSights session will focus on entrepreneurship and startups, and we hope to see you there. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this session, and now I'll hand it over to Michael. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mita, and thank you everybody for joining us. It's my pleasure to welcome you here on this wild and stormy evening, and I'm especially pleased that we have our distinguished panelists with us this evening who bring very current and interesting experience from their roles. So I'll briefly welcome each of the panelists. So Toulouse, first of all, is working with Google, Rohit with Abbott Labs, and Bren with Meta, formerly known as Facebook. So maybe just to begin with, we could just in turn, I'll ask each of the panelists to give us a really quick summary of their academic background, what they're doing now, and how they came to be where they are. So Toulouse, could I ask you first of all, just to tell us what you studied, what you're doing now, and how you ended up there, please?
Sure, thanks, Michael. Hi, everyone. My name is Toulouse, and I am a retail account manager at Google. I studied Commerce International with Chinese in UCD from 2012 to 2016. So not too long ago, I graduated about 5-6 years ago. When I started at UCD, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do after graduating. I kind of just wanted to learn Chinese. And it was only in final year really that I found that there was, I guess, roles in tech, because I cannot code, know nothing about computer science. And so I always thought roles in like Google, Facebook, or any of the big tech companies really needed just software engineers and software developers. So at the end of final year, I actually attended one of the first web summits. It was being held in RDS, and they had a careers night. And that's where I heard a lot more about the tech world. And I saw that they had a grad program. So I applied and I joined Web Summit straight after college for a year. And I worked on various teams, the startups team, the content marketing team, learned a lot, and decided I wanted to kind of go deeper into tech. And I joined Salesforce. So Salesforce creates soft CRM software for all kinds of businesses. And I worked as a solutions consultant for them, basically building demos, presenting demos, and working with sales executives to help clients understand the value of Salesforce's technology. It was great. I spent about 2 years there and decided, because in Salesforce, I was working with the UK market, I wanted to join an emerging market team. So I joined Google to work with the sub-Saharan African market, where I work with advertisers based in South Africa. So I've been in Google just over 2 years now as well, working as an account manager, and basically meaning I work with clients who are using Google Ads and try to help them grow on their use of the platform. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind journey. I never thought this is where I would end up. I kind of thought maybe I would go into marketing or something like that, but I have loved technology because it offers the opportunity to do all types of work, from presenting, communicating, entrepreneurship in some senses, and really just owning what you do, and I guess seeing the back end of all the technologies that we use on a day-to-day basis. So that's a bit about myself. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you very much, Lucy. And If you can learn Chinese, I guess technology is probably not that difficult.
I would hope so.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bren, can I move on to you next, please? So, Bren, you're with Facebook, now known as Meta.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Bren. I studied economics and finance in UCD from 2013 to 16. And I was the same. I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I came out. But I kept an open mind, and there was a startup forming in the Philippines. A group of Irish people were setting up a fintech startup, so it was kind of related to finance. And I kind of just got involved in data analysis from there, a lot of reporting and things that we needed to do kind of just within day-to-day in the business. So that was a lot of SQL, really, and sort of some Excel and some Python. And then from there, I kind of realized that to take the next step would involve maybe doing a master's or something in the data sphere. So I did a master's in statistics in UCD. And then when I came back, I was applying for jobs in data analytics. And yeah, I kind of came across the role on Facebook. And I think it's an interesting role because there's a lot of, you're given open-ended problems a lot of the time, and it's up to you to kind of come up with your own solutions. So that's kind of background to me.
Thanks, Bren. I'm glad to hear you reinforce our message about Excel being important. people often don't believe that. Glad to hear that. Thank you. And Rohit, you're with Abbott Labs and you're a graduate of our MSc in Business Analytics. So perhaps you could just again similar things. So why you chose to study what you did, I guess, and how it brought you to the role you're in at the moment.
Thanks, Michael. Hello, everyone. My name is Rohit Singh, and I'm currently a business analyst with Abbott Labs based in Galway. So I have a slightly different career path as compared to the other two panelists. So I did my bachelor's degree back in India. So it was a bachelor's in electrical and electronics engineering. And post that, I started working in IT, which is not in line with what I did in my undergrad. So I moved from electrical engineering onto IT. I worked with a company called Tata Consultancy Services back in India. So I worked as a BI developer, business intelligence developer. So pretty early on in my career, I'd say that I had exposure to data analytics as it was in its infancy at that stage. So it was a very good time to come into BI analytics at that stage, and that's when I realized that I could develop my skills further in data science, which is when I decided to go in for a master's. And one of the very few colleges that were offering a master's in data science at the time, that was back in 2016, was UCD Smurfit. So I enrolled in the MSc in Business Analytics course. So I enrolled in 2016. I graduated in 2017. And I was lucky enough to get a job in Ireland with version 1. So I was with the Office of the Revenue Commissioners in Dublin for 2 years after that. So up until 2019, I worked as a BI consultant. So the initial part of my career was as a consultant with different clients. I worked with a lot of clients. But then in 2019, I decided that I wanted to become an in-house analyst, which is when I decided to switch to Seon Group, which is the parent company for Irish Jobs and Jobs.ie, which is also based out of Dublin. So I became a product/data analyst for Seon Group. So that was pretty interesting because it gave me a lot of opportunities to work with different technologies. For example, that was the first time I worked with NoSQL databases like MongoDB. So that was the backend. So yeah, in terms of tech stack, I'd say I've worked with a lot of different technologies. SQL, that's the base for everything. Python or Tableau, Power BI, and the list goes on and on. And very recently, I moved from Dublin to Galway to start my latest role with Abbott Labs, where I currently work as a business analyst. So the job title is business analyst, but my role is a Power BI specialist. So I'm currently overseeing a migration project from ClickView to Power BI. So the existing reports need to be migrated. So it's a platform migration. So it's a pretty big project that I'm currently working on. So yeah, it's been a very exciting journey so far for me, and looking forward to bigger and better things in future. So that's me.
Great, thank you, Rohit. Thanks, everybody. Feel free to ask questions, anybody, as we go along, and maybe just to continue. So I'll go back around our panelists once more, if that's okay. So just maybe help us to understand. So Rohit in particular was describing pretty technical activities in your job. So maybe I'll go back to you first, or if that's okay. The balance of technical work versus teamwork, and the kind of more business consulting type of activity. So maybe just give us an idea. So Rohit, in your case, is your job, are you spending a lot of time on technical analysis and building solutions and that kind of thing, or what's the balance between that and working with people and trying to understand their needs and trying, looking for business solutions within the enterprise?
I'd say it's a pretty even balance between both. So I mean, the technical part and the business aspect goes hand in hand. So you need to sit down with your stakeholders. You need to understand the requirements, because most of the work that a data analyst or a business analyst would do depends on requirements that come in from business. So if you're creating a report, if you're creating a piece of analysis, you need to know what the business requirements are, which means you need to understand your requirements pretty clearly. And again, even if you understand the requirements, you need to have the technical know-how and the skill set to perform said analysis. So it's a balance between both, and it's a pretty exciting line to be in, I'd say.
So you're not sitting in a corner all day just doing purely technical work. That's something that I think maybe people envisage that would be the case, but obviously you're spending as much time interacting with the business and people in the business as you are actually problem solving and doing analytics. Great. So if I go, Bren, could I ask you the same question then, just the nature of your role? I mean, is it the case that you're just sitting on your own doing maths all the time?
I think that's a pretty good point, actually. I think that's something that I probably would have thought beforehand as well. That you think of a lot of software developers, and they might sit in a room and coding, but it all depends on what the business need is. So I work in global ops in Facebook, which is we try to keep Facebook safe. So if any content violates the platform, we need to take it down. And one of the areas I work in is at-risk countries. So if there's violent content in a country that's at risk, so the content could potentially lead to off-platform harm, to take them sooner. So it's an example of kind of the real world impact of what you're doing, but the data analytics all comes back from, I guess, the real world impact. You're not just doing it for the sake of a project. It's always, we need to have visibility into the risks that we're facing. But yeah, I think the majority of the role, I'd say probably half and half. My role is speaking with stakeholders, understanding what they want, working on project briefs, and then the technical aspect probably forms quite little of it. I think maybe the very heavy tech, not quite, probably half and half. But maybe a lot might be visualization as well, which of course there is a technical aspect to that, but the main part is it readable? Is it understandable by people? Are they finding it useful? So yeah,
thank you. So you mentioned visualization. So and obviously the particular problem that you're dealing with is a moving target. So the security concerns are probably changing all the time. And in terms of visualization, then I guess what part of your role then is trying to communicate something very technical with other less technical people in the business. So do you use geographic data, for instance, when it comes to security risks?
Yeah, I think a lot of the role is really communicating technical things and making it in a very readable format for the leadership, who may not necessarily understand the technical aspects, but they just want to know, as you're saying, the risks, how much, in my case, how much content is going up on the platform that needs to be taken down, and how much of that is severe. So some content will be naturally more severe than others. So how do we identify which is the most valuable content and take those down first? Which either will be through machine learning models that automatically capture that, or it gets sent to human reviewers, who obviously have to review it and take down. But yeah, I guess the risks are set by leadership. They'd say this is what we want to capture, and then it's up to the data analyst to really understand where that data comes from. And a lot of the role is data quality as well, and building tables and making sure that the data is all in the right place. Because as you can imagine, well, from my background, especially in the startup, we didn't have any data. So the first is a case of what do we need? And then, okay, let's start collecting it, and then let's start using it. So it's not a case of, I think maybe when you're in university, you're always working on clean data sets, but in the real world, it's never that easy. And yeah, just actually capturing the data is probably the hardest part a lot of the time.
So you're operating in a sea of data at the moment, presumably, you know, so you're operating with vast amounts of data, and you mentioned machine learning. So the idea there, I guess, is to try to develop algorithms that can analyze language and analyze, well, English or whatever language, and maybe image content as well, to try to figure out, or try to get better at mining the data to see where the problems are. So that, I would imagine, that's an evolving scenario all the time.
Absolutely. And that's something that with more data, the machines just get better. Half of the job is we'd allocate half of resources to actually taking content down, and the other half to what's called labeling. So you have things that you know are violating, and then those are what feed into the classifier or the machine model. So if we know 10 images are all violating our policies, then the machine learns from the, as you're saying, the language detection, the image detection, what kind of things consist of that violation, and then it's able to pick them out more effectively, I guess, automatically.
So it's an evolving task. It's changing all the time, I guess. Yeah. Great. Toulouse, can I, a similar question then for you? Are you stuck in a corner doing maths all day, or is that, that's a kind of a preconception maybe that people have, but I hope you're going to tell me that that's not the case.
No, I do absolutely no maths. Though today I did do a little bit of maths on my calculator on my phone for the first time in a while. But no, so as an account manager, I'm very much client facing. I spend a lot of my day talking in meetings, doing presentations, understanding clients' issues, providing solutions. So a lot of my time is actually made up with meeting people. And by the end of the day, I'm actually quite tired of not having been in a corner, and I go into a corner. But on a day-to-day, I guess as an account manager, the main thing you're doing, what you're responsible for, is growing revenue. Whether you're an account manager in Google, Facebook, anywhere, that's the main objective. And how you do that is your role. So I work with the Tesco's and the Dunnes Stores of South Africa, some of the largest retailers there. And similar to here, you see ads on TV, you see ads on radio, but you also see ads on Google Search, on YouTube, Gmail, and so on. And a lot of these advertisers just want to know what's the best way to reach the most relevant users with the most relevant content. And I help them figure that out, not just through audience targeting, but around, you know, people's interests, people's geolocations, what people have opted into, and basically, yeah, what's the best way to reach the most relevant users. So on a day-to-day basis, I'm speaking with these retailers, making sure they're hitting their own business objectives, because X amount of advertising spend should give X amount of business revenue. Are we hitting those objectives? If not, what can we change? Is it that your ads on YouTube are really boring and everyone skips it? Do you need a creative consultancy? Or is it that you have lots of new digital advertising executives who don't really know what's the best copy to put in Google search? Then I would set up a training session. Or is it that your website is actually really slow, and even after someone clicks your ad, it takes a long time for the website to load, so they actually leave and don't end up converting? Then I get them to talk to our technical specialists. So it's a lot about stakeholder mapping, figuring out who's the best person to speak with our contacts, and then at the end of the day, hopefully grow the revenue clients are spending on Google.
Brilliant, thanks, Susan. So I think what you all have in common is you're a bridge between the business and technology. So I think you're all very, you have a strong grounding, obviously, in the technology and how it works. It's in your case, I guess it's the famous algorithm. So it's trying to direct advertising in the most appropriate way. And like with meta security risks and ads issues as well, it's a constantly evolving scenario. So there's a question that's popped up in the chat, was actually one that was on my mind as well. So, I suppose from my point of view, I'd love to know, we mentioned Excel as, I was being slightly tongue in cheek because people think Excel is kind of a basic tool, but actually it's something that I think we all continue to use all the time if we're doing anything with numbers, basically. And so, but the question that's arising there is, what would you advise people to focus on in their studies? And beyond that, I guess I'm thinking, what are we missing maybe from the curriculum that we could add to better prepare people for these kinds of careers?
If I could jump in, one thing I would say I wish I spent a little bit more time listening in class for was some of the marketing classes. I think so much of what we see nowadays, especially because obviously social media is quite big, is marketing, and we know kind of intrinsically what is good marketing, what is bad marketing. But I think it's really interesting to actually focus on what underpins good marketing, because you might know what it is when you see it, but how do you create it? And I think nearly every job has an aspect of marketing, whether you're marketing your role, you're marketing the company, you're marketing the solution in the company. I think that's one thing to really focus on, as well as business strategy, just in general, kind of understanding, okay, why would one company sell their product so much cheaper than another company, and what advantages that give them over someone else, and really understanding that, because then in the workplace, you're then able to translate, oh, the reason our solutions are so much more expensive than our competitors is this, this, and this. And that helps you really understand, I guess, your role in the company and the value that you bring. So those are two things I'd really recommend focusing on, those specific modules. Great,
thank you. So that's interesting, because they're things that we think of as quite traditional. Do you know what I mean, in terms of the content of a business degree, and yet you're seeing them put into practice.
Really important, yeah.
Brilliant, yeah, that's interesting, yeah. Bren, any thoughts on things that you would advise somebody, here is something you should focus on in your studies, or when we look at the curriculum, are there areas where you think we should be focusing a little bit more?
Yeah, just thinking now, I think, so I did the master's in UCD, and did a lot of Python programming modules and R programming, which is really good. But I don't think there's any SQL courses in UCD. As far as, well, I'm sure that the business analytics course there probably is. But yeah, maybe just SQL is really the backbone of most of the data analytics work. So that's the language you use to pull data directly from the database, and then you do your analysis in Excel or Python. So I think basic skills in SQL is definitely something that people could look at during their undergrad. And then possibly being comfortable in Python, but I wouldn't be too worried about that, because it's such a vast language. There's so many different things to learn that it can just be overwhelming in university. So maybe just understanding how to access it, how to use down on Jupyter notebooks or whatever platform you want to actually use to execute code, and then just understanding basics of how maybe data is manipulated or tables. But again, possibly not getting too overwhelmed by all the different functions and all the different packages that you can download, because there's so many.
Great. I'm ashamed to say that we actually do a little bit less on databases than we did 10 years ago. And it's actually the setup is quite difficult. So, for somebody to get an introduction to databases now, it's kind of hard to easily choose tools that people can learn quickly. Whereas I think 10 years ago, everybody used Microsoft Access, and that worked pretty well. So something we probably need to think about as well. Thanks, Bren. Rohit, in your case then, any thoughts? So programming languages, we probably, I guess, could do a little bit more of. You mentioned you use Power BI a lot, so which is I guess kind of a core business analytics and visualization tool. Would it be appropriate to use a little more of something like that say in an undergraduate business degree?
It is actually. So first of all, I'd like to agree with what Bren said, that there's a need to increase the exposure to databases within the curriculum, because that essentially is where the data is stored, and you need to know a way how to extract the data. So it's either going to be in a SQL database, a Redshift database, or one of many available databases that are in the market. So yeah, the first focus would be the database. Coming to Power BI, Power BI is it's a data visualization tool. So in my experience, what we learned in our masters, we worked primarily on Tableau, which is again another data visualization tool. From what I've seen in my experience, Power BI is generally it's a more preferred tool, because the licenses are cheaper. Tableau licenses are slightly more expensive, so companies prefer to use Power BI in companies that I've worked in specifically. So in terms of including data visualization, that could be a really good option if you could include that in the undergrad degree as well. I'm not really sure if it is a part of the curriculum, but it would definitely be a good addition, because visualization again is not, you could give the same data set to many different people, you'd get different results, but you have to choose the best one, in the sense, you need to see which one gets the point forth to your audience. So you have to gauge the impact that your report has. So I think data visualization is a very important line to focus on as well.
Thanks, Rohit. Yeah, it's interesting. It's not something really that features in the undergraduate curriculum, but I can see how it could be presented from the perspective of the business rather than the technology. So, if we come back to marketing and digital marketing in particular, so to use dashboards to show, marketing activity and marketing outcomes could be quite powerful, I think. Great. So another question there, do you need to do a summer internship in order to get a graduate role with a tech company? So, I guess it's not a law, but maybe any reflections on that. So did any of you undertake internships that helped you with your career path?
I think this question is probably coming from a finance perspective, because I think a lot in finance, a lot of the graduates they take on have done summer internships, but I don't think that's the case in tech companies at all. The hiring programs would be quite different from possibly the big banks or the consultancy firms that generally hire based on, they have a huge intake of summer interns and they hire the best of those. But I think in tech companies, it's really just the interview process and coming in and really maybe showing past work you've done. So as opposed to them testing you out in the summer internship, you might have a GitHub page and you past projects you've worked on that you can talk to and they really interview you throughout the interview process.
Great. So I know a lot of in the Quinn School, obviously, I think more than half of the students in the Quinn School now take a year-long internship. And a lot of them are kind of accountancy and consulting firms and that kind of thing. So that's what you're saying, Bren, is it's the things that make you stand out. And so I know, Toulouse, from your background that, to have studied Chinese straight away is, helps you to stand out. Is there anything else that you think you did to enhance your CV that made you more attractive to employers?
Yeah, so just as Bren said, for tech companies, you definitely don't have to have done summer internships. I think what tech companies really look for is a diversity of knowledge, whether that's come from your undergrad, your master's, or even just a job you've had. So for example, working in Salesforce, I wasn't working with the Chinese market, but the fact that I had studied Chinese showed that I was open to learning new things from scratch, and able to kind of retain that knowledge. And that's what they wanted to then hone. And that's kind of one of the reasons they hired me. So anything that's different about you, any experience you have, whether that's a friend of mine, Ronan, wrote on his CV the fact that he's a professional sheep caller. Isn't that, yeah? So, and that was one of the reasons I got the job at Salesforce, because that's, again, a skill that you require work to do. You have to learn it, and he stuck at it, and now he could do it. And as a result, myself and Ronan actually were the only two people on the Salesforce grad program who were hired who didn't have a master's, because we had kind of different backgrounds, and that kind of brought us up to the level of the 98 other people who had a master's already. So it really does show that you can make the most of whatever skills you have. So even if you don't spend your summer at an internship, spend it maybe volunteering with a startup, or freelance content writing, and whatever the case is, to show that you have your own initiative, and that you're proactive and a self-starter. Those are the real things I think tech companies want to see, because all sorts of people make up a tech company. The people on my team, for example, have backgrounds in like working in insurance, working in film, philosophy studies, real random, but they're all able to kind of put their minds toward a specific solution, collaborate well, and get the job done. And that's kind of what they want to see in tech companies.
Well, that's a great achievement to be, that two of you got through with that master's, because I guess, when applying for tech companies, people might think mistakenly that they need to be very highly technically qualified, as well as having a good undergraduate degree. So, yeah, and I know I've often heard from recruiters that it's, a lot of people are very well qualified, and it's those extra things that stand out. Somebody took a chance, or somebody showed willingness to learn, whether it's Chinese or sheep calling, that, these are extra skills that show a broad interest, I guess, and a wide range of aptitudes, which is interesting. And so, Rohit, in your case, you came from, Tata, which is it must be one of the biggest consulting firms in the world. And so, would you say that was something that really helped you to stand out, or were there other things that you had done that enhanced your employment prospects?
My experience with Tata definitely helped, because I had 3 years of work experience before I came in for my master's. So I think that gave me an edge over a lot of students that were in my class. Of course, a lot of a lot of students that came in from India had the same profile as myself. We all had worked for maybe 3 or 4 years in a technically consultancy back home. So again, it was a lot of competition, because there were people with very similar profiles to yourself, but there was also an edge that a lot of people who were probably younger, who had just finished their undergraduate. So it definitely gave me an edge in that sense. What really helped me again was my final thesis, I would say, because I did my final thesis and internship with Accenture in Dublin. So the project that we worked on was pretty interesting, I'd say, because we created a used car pricing model for the Republic of Ireland specifically. And we did a lot of research, I'd say, on the topic, looking at different markets in the world. And we couldn't really find anything at the time, that was similar to what we were doing. There was about 5 or 6 different projects that had been done on creating used car recommenders or pricing models in the world. So this was a really good opportunity for us, to create something new and very specific to the Republic of Ireland in that case. So mentioning that on my CV actually gave me an edge, because each and every interview that I attended, that actually caught the eye of lots of interviewers and recruiters, because I was always asked this question, about my projects. So I think the internship and the experience I gained completing the internship and completing my thesis, I think that that was an added bonus to my CV as well, and that really helped me to get a job in Ireland.
Brilliant, thanks, Rohit. Okay, so, sorry, I think see another question popped up. Just before I get to that, I just have another broad question that occurs to me. So among your peer groups, so the people maybe that you studied with, what's the kind of breakdown in terms of the people that you know about? So are people, a lot of them going into technical type roles, or do you hear about that from your classmates?
I think a lot of people I maybe went to school with or worked with might not have started in a technical role, but they're ending up going to a tech company now. I think there's so many tech companies around the world. It's kind of related to the question in the Q&A. Is there much opportunity for traveling for work? I think people value tech companies, the flexibility of tech companies, that you can, they're leading people in remote work. Even before the pandemic, you could really work from anywhere. And I guess, yeah, I think so. A lot of people I know and went skill with are kind of moving towards that section now, I would say.
So probably more people are, in many cases, people who probably didn't expect to end up in, well, we could differentiate, I guess. So we have tech roles and we have tech companies, and, you know, the tech companies are huge employers now, and maybe not all of the roles are what we imagine as being very, you know, numerical and technical. So Talisha, how about you? What about your peer group? Do you see a lot of people going into the technology companies?
Yeah, so a lot of my friends are actually in technology companies, and I think it's due to that breakdown in, as you say, tech companies as employers and tech roles. A lot of my friends are in tech companies, but a lot of them in more client-facing sales roles, and that's a good chunk of tech companies. Everyone kind of thinks of, oh, they've got the developers to create the software. Someone has to sell the software and get customers onboarded on the software, help them use the software, troubleshoot and grow them. And so there's a lot of my friends working as account managers, sales development reps, customer success, which is usually post-sales in like a large enterprise software company, and account executives, so selling. So yeah, a lot of my friends are in tech companies, and as Bren said, one of the reasons is travel. In my last job in Salesforce, even though I knew I wanted to travel, I was going to the UK or somewhere in Europe at least once a week, which is exciting for the first 3 months. And then you kind of get tired of the 6 a.m. flights. And now working in Google, I started just before COVID. So I went to South Africa for 2 weeks. Hopefully I'll go again in the next couple of months. So a lot of tech companies do allow you to travel quite a bit. And because you're meeting clients, you're selling the solutions, and they kind of want you to have that face time with clients. So yeah, a good opportunity for travel. But yeah, there's not only technical roles, there's also just people roles in tech companies.
Great. And Rohit, I guess you're slightly different in that you graduated from a technically kind of based master's, but so the class that you graduated with, how's everybody else doing in terms of the kinds of jobs that they're doing? Are they what they wanted? Are they more technical, more business roles, or maybe some unexpected career outcomes?
I think from what I know, most of us have continued down the data analyst, data scientist, data engineer path. So it's a continuation of what we learned in our masters. And I do remember there was somebody who went on to do his MBA, I guess, again from UCD. So they did their masters in business analytics. I think they went on to join the MBA course the very next semester. So yeah, there have been people who've taken a different career path as well, but the majority of the students in my batch, I think, have stuck with the tech roles.
That's rare for that person must love studying. One other thought that that occurs to me is strangely, so we've two of your graduates at the Quinn School. One of you, Rohit, you're a graduate of the Smurfit School. Something that I think is a little bit of a missed opportunity is the MSc in Business Analytics, as I mentioned, has gone from strength to strength because of the demand that's in the workplace. And so we now have 150 people on a master's program, which is pretty unusual, but very, very few from the Quinn School and very few from business schools generally. So it's, you know, it's, I guess we're maybe not doing a great job at the general undergraduate level, which is why we're having this discussion. So we think more people should consider a career in the business analytics area. So that's just, I guess, a comment from my side. And you know, maybe it's at the as people are going through their undergraduate degree, they're maybe just a little bit less aware of the great career opportunities that are out there. Or maybe a lot of people in the Quinn School think they're not technical enough to be looking at this as a career path.
Yeah, I think I guess, yeah, as you're saying, a lot of people, which is the benefit of doing a session like this. But I also think there's almost like you think it's going to be more of a steep learning curve than it is, especially the more technical roles in data analytics. You think that, oh, I've studied accounting or I've studied marketing and I've done these things in the Quinn School, so I should really stay on that path, and it's going to take me months, years to really catch up to speed to someone who's done an undergrad in data science, which is not the case at all. You might find that you pick it up really easily. You can pick it up in a couple of months, and a lot of the things you would have learned and studied in Quinn School, business, accounting related, that would all stand to you, because it's all, a lot of it's numbers and a lot of it's, you know, using Excel and software. So yeah, really the learning curve is not as steep as people think, and it's definitely a good option to keep in mind if you're interested.
Brilliant. So that's the message that you know, in my position, I'm hearing from companies all the time that there's just unfilled demand for people with suitable qualifications, and they might have a master's in business analytics, but they certainly don't have to, I think, as you've demonstrated. So that's a great message to get across. Okay, I think unless anybody has any further questions, I think we'll wrap up soon. Or if any of you have any further comments that you'd like to add, although I think we've kind of given a fairly good coverage. So is that okay then? I think we'll, yeah, again, I really genuinely appreciate you getting involved. Very interesting discussion. It's lovely for me to hear how well everybody's doing. And, you know, as I say, I'm always trying to get the message across that careers in this area are really very interesting. And I think we can do to dispel the myth that it's, you know, the kinds of roles that you have are that nice mix of business and technology, and it's not for, you know, it's not for somebody who's going to be stuck in a corner, as I say, just doing maths and programming. That's great. So thank you all very much indeed, everybody. Really appreciate you coming along, and that was a very useful and positive discussion. So unless anybody has any urgent questions, we'll end there. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.